Hello and welcome to Switch Scheme and happy 4th of July. I wanted to bring something to you a little bit different today in celebration, and that is a tier list. As you saw from the title and from the thumbnail, we're doing a tier list of Resident Evil, my favorite gaming franchise. How much do I like it? Well, I got the shirts. I have the entire book series that follows all the games, and these are old. You'll notice one isn't old, but you can see how yellow these pages are because this is an old series that I've kept pretty much my whole life. I did have to replace number 5 Nemesis, unfortunately. I don't know where the original one went that I had. And I have, for example, just to show you more of how much I love this series, I have autographs from a lot of the voice cast and motion capture artists. So here's Miss Thompson for Jill. I have Claire, and then I also, of course, because it's just as important as Claire, have Leon. This is artwork that Leon's actor himself does, and then he sells it on his website, and then I got him to sign this for me. So I have many more of these, mind you. I have the sisters and Lady D from Village. I have the original Chris, Mr. White from the remake. I have a whole bunch of those autographs. They're just in another room. We have the books, I have the shirts, I have the merch. I still have my original discs for 1, 2, and 3 in a disc container somewhere in my garage. I love this series. So I wanted to do this tier list for fun, but also because it's, again, a new type of content that I haven't done for the channel. So here we go. Here's the tier list. I did splice together a bunch of the Resident Evil trailers down below for you guys to kind of peek at while we go through these. But basically, this tier list is going to be based on how much I personally enjoy these games. There are going to be games on this list that I do not like, and there's only a couple on this list that I have not completed, and I'll address that when we get there. So first things first, let's jump right into it. The original Resident Evil. I'm going to drop this here in A. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, but it's the original, that should be the S, and you could be correct. However, I would argue that because of the advancements that came in the next few games, that this is kind of just the building block of the system. It's great, don't get me wrong. You have that iconic moment where the zombie first turns and sees you. You have, the tank controls that you have to get used to, which kind of add to that, that heightened sense of scare that the game is trying to push you through. The fixed camera angles, which I wish they would go back to. There's just so much about that original that I absolutely love. You have the whole storyline with Wesker and him turning on stars, and you learning all the intricacies of what's actually going on. It's all fantastic. But at the end of the day, mechanically, it's not that great when you compare it to something like the second game, which is up next. It just is missing some of that little bit of sauce, some of that little salt that just makes it just a little bit better. And for me, that's why it's an A. It's a great experience. I go back to it all the time. I love it, but it's just not S tier. Now, speaking of S tier, we have Resident Evil 2, the original. And of course, wait, let's get a thumbnail. Of course, this is going up into S tier. They took all the stuff from the original, right? The same mechanics, the same systems, right? Fixed camera angles, tank controls, limited inventory, couple characters, but they expanded on it so much that the system overall just feels so much better. And I like that we took it out of the mansion, right? Now we're in Raccoon City. Sure, most of it is in the Hive, in the Raccoon City Police Department. You're not really seeing a lot of the city, not like you do in Nemesis, but overall, it's a lot of fun kind of expanding on the world that we're already stuck in from the first game, right? You see Birkin and the G virus. You get to see Mr. X and his few little cameos that he has in this game versus the remake, which we'll discuss later. And it's just so great, right? You have that first moment very early in the game where you see the liquor. And you, as someone who's never experienced this before, obviously, as a kid, most likely, you're just like, what is that? How am I going to defeat that? And had you played your cards right when you met Kendo, you got that gun that he was holding, which would help you beat that liquor. Speaking of which, right, you have some of the most hilarious dialogue in gaming coming from this series, and I would argue some of it is even funnier in the second game, right? Yes, the first game you have the you were almost a Jill sandwich.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
right? You have that, or wow, what a mansion.
What is this?
Wow, what a mansion!
You know, you have those lines that we all remember, but how many of you remember, oh, sorry about that, babe?
Ooh. Sorry about that, babe.
Oh, you don't worry about a thing, darling. I've got my eye on everything around here, or whatever the hell Kendo says to Claire. It's so freaking hilarious. It's that B-movie cheese that we come to these games for, and I love it. Next, we have Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, and for me, I'm gonna pop this here in B tier, mostly because I don't like Nemesis, and I know that's such a controversial take, and I'm so sorry. But the fact of the matter is because you have Nemesis in the game, you have more tools to in your arsenal to kind of defeat him, right? Especially if you play on like the normal mode where they give you like an assault rifle and all this ammo and stuff. So when you meet Nemesis, it's like whatever. Now, yes, you could play on the harder mode where it is literally just a pistol, some ammo, and then your basic starting item. That's fine, and that's great. And that's honestly how I end up playing the game. But then you feel so hampered against Nemesis that you can't really keep up with him, especially in that first encounter with Brad. And it leads to some frustrating situations for me where you're trying to get through that first hurdle of Nemesis. Now, once you get into the game and you're running around and he's chasing you and you're running into him randomly in places like inside the police department or in the courtyards, yes, you're a little bit more able to deal with him. So it's a lot more fun when he shows up. You're like, how do I want to handle this? Do I want to just go head on and try to kill him? Do I want to try to get out of here? Do I want to run? Do I want to face him? What option do I want to pick when it gives me the option of, shine the light in his face or use the electric wire or whatever it was on the tower? Sure, all that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, I kind of like taking my time, walking through the zones, exploring this little atmosphere of the world that it's trying to give me. And with Nemesis, I didn't really get to do that because he's always on your tail. And yes, that is a different type of fear. That is a different type of terror that this game is trying to invoke. That's just not the type of terror and fear that I personally enjoy. So for me, Nemesis, although a great game in this trilogy, it wraps up this trilogy great, it's still a B tier for me personally. Next, we have Resident Evil Survivor. If you haven't seen the Angry Video Game Nerd version of this, please see it. It's basically going to summarize everything I would say. Code Veronica. Code Veronica for me is also going to be a B tier. Code Veronica is kind of like the black sheep of the mainline games because unfortunately, it being called Code Veronica X, a lot of people, myself included, thought this was more of a spin-off game. And that's basically how it was treated, right? Because you have Resident Evil 4, which is titled Resident Evil 4. And when you go through the chronological order of things, you have Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, where the heck did Code Veronica go? Well, it's supposed to be between 3 and 4. And unfortunately, I think that's a big miss. I think that was a huge miss on their part because Resident Evil Code Veronica has a lot to add to the story. You have Claire, she's going off looking for her brother. She ends up in an umbrella facility. They catch her, they put her on an island. I believe it's off the coast of Europe. And now she's got to figure out what to do because once again, Umbrella doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know their ass from elbows and an outbreak occurs and she's got to survive. You get the reintroduction of Wesker coming back from the first game where you thought he was dead. You get to see his new powers from, the infusion from the T-virus and him and all the experiments and stuff. It's a great addition to the story that unfortunately I think a lot of people miss because they assume it's not a necessary play. Think something akin to like Outbreak or Umbrella Corps, Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, right? These are side games that some people think this is a side game, and I would argue this should have been Resident Evil 4. But when it comes to the gameplay, right, it's still fixed angles, it still has tank controls, it does try to move the camera a little bit more. It tries to give you more of a dynamic fixed camera system. It's really well done. I like it. But then you have the moments with like the metal detector, which drags the gameplay way down. It's a game that I do think they need to remake. Out of all the remakes, this is the one I'm hoping they do the most. And I wish they would keep the original style of tank controls, but they're obviously not going to do that. Third-person Resident Evil remake seems to be the way they're going to go. But for me, Resident Evil Code Veronica is a game that is good. It's a good addition to the Resident Evil formula. It just needs a little bit more sauce, and I think that a remake would do it well. Resident Evil Gaiden. This is a game a lot of people probably don't even know exists. This is a Game Boy Color game where you play, I believe you played as Barry. I don't know why it shows someone that looks like Leon on the cover. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I played it. I thought you played Barry on a cruise ship trying to figure out what's going on once again because Umbrella. It has this really weird combat system where you run into a zombie and then it turns into like a quick time event thing where you're trying to aim your shot by hitting the button at the right time to shoot the zombies. It's okay. This is a C tier. It's not the most trashiest Resident Evil. It's not the worst Resident Evil game I've ever played, but it is an enjoyable experience. I have the cart somewhere in my room and I emulate it on my phone. And there are times where I'm just like, let me pop it in and see what's going on and, you know, have a little bit of fun with it. It's goofy, it's bad, but you know what? It's kind of like so bad that it's good almost, because it is a unique look at Resident Evil on a handheld back in the day where handhelds weren't that powerful. So for me, it's a C tier. Survivor 2, never played it. We're just gonna stick it there. I'm not gonna talk about it. I never played it. I don't have an opinion on it, but considering it's in this category, I'm gonna assume it's trash. Resident Evil, the remake. This is a S tier for me. The Resident Evil remake is one of the best games in the entire library, and there's only one other game that I like more than it. So if we're gonna put these in order, this goes here. What I like about this remake is it doesn't sacrifice anything from the original game, right? All the flaws that were there, right? It didn't have the quick turn, which wasn't brought in until Resident Evil 3. It didn't have a lot of the different types of movement mechanics. It didn't have the good looks and visuals that were coming with something like Code Veronica. And they took all that and they said, let's, hold my beer, let's do this. And they gave us arguably one of the best survival horror experiences you could possibly have, where the story fits perfectly with what it was doing before, and they just add on to it with the Lisa Trevor line and all that stuff. The visuals hold up today because they're not trying to go for so hyper realistic. They're kind of going for this sort of almost Pixar-y look to everything, where it's not, like I said, it's not strictly realistic, but it doesn't look so goofy or like old that it doesn't work in today's market. It's just really well made. They added the defense items such as the knife and the shock, the little taser, and then the grenades. All that was added, which makes the game a little bit more fun. I do understand a lot of the arguments that it makes the game too easy, right? Because you just have those on you, and the one or two times you've happened to get caught, you're fine. That's kind of its own thing. I liked it for me, I was younger, right? I was still a teenager when this came out. So for me, I wasn't that great at games. I think I was maybe 14 at the time, and having those was definitely nice. You have them playing on classic moments, right? You go into that hallway, the famous hallway from the first game, and maybe I'll play a clip showing both versions. In the first game, you go in that hallway, dog comes through, you jump probably 2 feet off the couch. You've never been this scared in your life. What do? Run, or kill the dog. And then in the remake, they have that same hallway, right? Because it's a remake. And when you first go through it, they have something slam against the window. So you think here comes the dog, but it never comes. And it's not until later, when you've let your guard down, you assume, okay, they acknowledge that meme. It is what it is. They're not doing it, obviously. Let me just put my guard down and continue. And then later, when you come back through the other way, that's when it happens. And you're like, oh my God, they got me again. It's phenomenal gameplay design. There's very few negatives I could ever say about the original Resident Evil remake, and I don't really think I have any other than maybe, I think Mercenaries would have been a fun addition to this, something like that, but here we are. Resident Evil 0. Resident Evil 0 is one of those games that I mixed on because Rebecca Chambers is one of my favorite characters, especially if you read the book. She's a lot more fleshed out in the books, and therefore I have a little bit more of a connection to her as a character. If you only know her from the games, you may not feel that way, right? She's kind of just the young, inexperienced rookie medic from Bravo team, and you get to explore that more here in Resident Evil 0. My issue with 0 is it's not a fun play. And the reason I say that is because they took out some of the key mechanics that make Resident Evil what it is. So it's not as much of, let's say, a hindrance, if you will, right? You don't have the item box. You have to drop your items on the ground wherever you need them to be, and then you have to trek all the way back to go get them. So for example, right after you finish the train sequence, I put the hook shot down. I'm thinking, oh, I don't need this thing. It was for the train sequence. Let me get out of here and leave that on the ground so I have space. here I am maybe an hour or two in the game, and the game's like, oh, by the way, you need that hook shot. Oh, and also you left it in the courtyard all the way at the beginning. You got to go get it. And that's kind of the point where I was like, this is annoying. This became more annoying than it became a new mechanic to play with, and I didn't like it at all. The team swapping thing is fine. It is what it is. It led for some interesting puzzles. There was some jank with some of the enemies, like the little monkey dudes. I can't remember their names, but like if you didn't get them at the right angle, they could literally stun lock you against the wall and you're screwed. So there were some weird things that could happen. This is another one of those games that I think would really benefit from a remake, because it's a story that I really do want told. I like the story of Bravo Team kind of being called in, checking all this out. My thing is though, like the leeches was kind of silly. I don't think they did a good enough job in the game explaining the leeches. They're important. Yes, they were some of the original test subjects of the T virus, but they create Marcus in their likeness, and that's the bad guy. The Queen Leech, like it was a little silly, but I mean, it's Resident Evil. What do you expect? For me though, Resident Evil 0 is going to go in C tier. I don't find myself going back to this one very often, not nearly as much as I go back to these. Resident Evil Dead Aim. Dead Aim is basically what Survivor wanted to be. You are a character on a cruise ship, you run around and you engage in zombies. When you engage, it turns into an on-rail shooter, and you try to shoot them down. It came out with the Wii, so you can imagine, you know, you're using the Wiimote to line up your shots and stuff like that. It came out, I think initially, however, for consoles. It wasn't a Wii game at first, but excuse me, my bad. Umbrella Chronicles was the one on the Wii. Dead Aim came out on PlayStation 2, I recall. And it was fun, right? You initiate combat. It would bring up the arcade style screen. You would move the sticks around and try to line up your shots. You'd hit the zombies, knock them down, and then you'd move on. It's fine. It's not as bad as Survivor, but I still would never go back to it. So I'm gonna stick it here in D. I'm sorry I did get it mixed up with the Umbrella Chronicles, which we'll talk about later. Outbreak, and we're gonna talk about both Outbreak 1 and 2 together because they're basically the same thing. Outbreak was a game that I absolutely loved the concept for, right? You have a multiplayer Resident Evil where it's not versus, everyone's working together, and you have to get your character, whoever you picked out of like 9 people, out of Raccoon City before either A, you succumb to the virus, or B, the bomb drops. And that was the whole concept, and you had to work together with your teammates to make this happen. What a great idea, right? You have that awesome opening, where all the characters are in the bar and the zombies start to come in, and then you start in that position, right? You can play any of the characters you want, and they start in that bar. You're running over to the bathroom, grabbing the wooden whatever, the 2x4. You're running around beating on the zombies to get them off of everybody. You're trying to collect everybody together, get them upstairs, get the stuff out of the safe, and then you're trying to get across the rooftops. You go through the burning building with the liquors. Like, it really had a good like series of levels that felt really cool, and the fact that you could play it with your friends was really awesome. And you had different characters to choose from. Now, if you're not familiar, Resident Evil 9 Requiem, that character Grace that we're going to follow is the daughter to one of the characters in Outbreak, which just further canonizes the events of Outbreak as these characters become more part of what the real canon is, which is great, right? I can't remember any of their names, and I do apologize, but you had the one girl who was really good with medicine. You had the one guy who could play dead. You had the cop who started with the gun, which was awesome. And then you had the security guard who was really good with melee weapons, right? You had all these different characters with different unique abilities, and you had to utilize those abilities together to get out. Now, obviously the game is a lot harder when you're playing by yourself, but it's not impossible, right? The AI could still manage these characters to some extent, but it definitely was a lot more fun with people. This was in the early days of the PlayStation Network, the early days of Xbox Online. It didn't function all that well, and unfortunately, I think that's why these games didn't do all that great, but I do think that if they did re-release Resident Evil Outbreak 1 and 2, give it a nice new sheen, make it look a little bit prettier, and re-release them on Steam, people would probably way prefer this type of multiplayer experience to whatever Reverse and Resistance ended up being. For me, I'm gonna put these in B tier because I love the concepts. I think they're a lot of fun. I can't go back to them as often just because I prefer playing them with other people, and the time restraint on the levels does kind of annoy me, right? Whether you want to or not, you are infected, and you do have to get out before your infection takes over. Taking hits increases how fast you get infected, and it's basically a clock. And I don't like playing games with clocks. I think it's an arbitrary system from the arcade days that I think needs to just go away, but that's what they added in here. So Outbreak 1 and 2 is B tier. Now we're gonna have one of the most controversial opinions. We have Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is, we're gonna get a thumbnail. No, Resident Evil 4 is a great game, right? There's no denying what this game has done for gaming as a whole when it comes to, you know, third-person shooters becoming really popular, people turning their survival horrors into more action games. For me, though, when it comes to Resident Evil 4, which I did get on GameCube because I was a GameCube player, I never liked it more than the remake. When I was playing Resident Evil, I wanted the remake. I wanted 0, I wanted 2, the original, 3, Outbreak. I wanted that. And so when Resident Evil came out, I didn't really like it. Like, yeah, it was fun, don't get me wrong. I absolutely had a blast with it, but I would always go back to these when I said, hey, I want to play Resident Evil. Over time, obviously, I grew into understanding what the changes were, why the mechanics changed, how great they are. But at the end of the day, I never liked it more than these. Now, that's the purist in me, I understand. This is most people's top game of the series. But for me, I'm going to stick it in A tier. Yes, it is a great game, and I do like it more than that one, that's for sure. I am going to put it above the original. But the fact of the matter is if you say, hey, go play Resident Evil, there's a different game that I'm always going to want to play, and that's going to be one down here. And it's the same thing, it's a third person, but it's a remake. And it's my favorite game. And again, we'll get there when we get there. But for me, Resident Evil 4, it has those moments, right? You have the El Gigante fight, you have the Lago fight, you have the Lago's Easter egg if you shoot the water, you have the big cheese. But then you get to the island at the end where it just becomes an all-out action game against the mercenaries. And I'm just kind of like, okay, this is silly. You know, it wasn't really for me. You have Krauser, who I thought was a cool character, but then you have Sadler, who, in my opinion, is one of the dumbest villains in Resident Evil. He had so many opportunities to kill Leon or to end Leon, and instead he's like, I'm gonna make my crony do it. But dude, you were literally just there. You could have done it yourself. You know, you tried injecting the stuff in Leon and it didn't work. Oh no, it's not helping. But okay, so then kill him. Have the big cheese kill him. But no, they have to keep stretching out. There's just parts of it that I don't like because from a story standpoint, it just was stupid. That Sadler was stupid. And then obviously you have Salazar, one of the best characters ever. And then they, you know, neutered him in the remake. Again, we'll talk about that later. Next, let's have Umbrella Chronicles. I'm going to move Resident Evil 5 over. Let's talk about these two together. It's basically if you took Resident Evil Survivor, stuck it on the Wii, and told the story of Resident Evil from the perspective of an arcade shooter. These games are fine. I'm gonna drop them in C tier. I do think they're fun. I do think if you're a Resident Evil fan, these are a good time. You can have fun with them, especially if you like arcade shooters or if you just want a quick TLDR of the Resident Evil story, these will suffice. They're just not my type of thing. Again, I'm more that old school survival horror player. Resident Evil 5, this is where people are gonna get mad. Resident Evil 5 for me was what I was looking for when it came to the mix between the action and the survival horror. And I like Chris Redfield more than I liked Leon. You have to remember, I grew up on the original playing as Chris. I grew up heavily loving the original remake. Yes, I liked 2. 2 was great, so Leon and Claire were obviously up there for me. But then I also really liked Code Veronica, which guess what? Has Chris in it. So when Chris was coming back as the main character, and it was gonna have Wesker, and it has Jill, 2 of my other favorite characters, this game was just banging on all cylinders. And I personally like the story here. I like this idea of, you know, bioterrorism being spread across the world, you know, Wesker trying to find a way to spread this Las Plagas variant around so that way he can take control, allow this thing to, you know, decide who is worthy and who is strong enough and make a world of only those who are worthy of this Las Plagas parasite. I thought that was really cool and terrifying. Whereas like with Leon, it was very condensed and contained in the village. The Resident Evil 5 really kind of spread out. Yeah, you were condensed into that little village of Africa, but because you have that ending sequence where he's on the bomber and he's trying to get it to a global level and you're on the ship while they're trying to load, it just felt like the stakes were higher and, you know, the world was more engaged in what was happening. So for me, I'm gonna put Resident Evil 5 in A tier, and for me, I like it more than the original Resident Evil 4. I know a lot of people are not going to like that opinion, and I know a lot of people are going to click off immediately and say this guy's opinion is garbage, and that's fine. That's your opinion. for me, I've always preferred 5. Now, I know a lot of people don't like 5 because of Sheva and her AI. I cannot recall personally having issues with Sheva's AI. Of course she did stupid things. This is back in the day where AI wasn't the best when it comes to teammates or enemies, but I never had an issue with her where she was just stupid. So I don't have that negative feeling. For me though, the story, seeing some of the classic enemies, right? We're going back, there's Lickers and, you know, Wesker and stuff like that. It just meant more for me here as a fan of the series as a whole. Gameplay wise, they're obviously both on the same level. They're both great games. They're probably S tier for most people, but for me, they're A tier, and I do like 5 more than 4. Resident Evil 3D Mercenaries. This game is fun. I have it on my 3DS. I still have the cart in my 3DS, I believe, or it's in my drawer. It's all right. I mean, I would say this is a D. I'm going to say C tier, because at the end of the day, I would rather play this than I would these. And the reason is because it's just Mercenaries. If you like the Mercenaries mode, which is a fantastic mode, you can't go wrong with this, and it's in 3D. And we'll have to admit, right, the 3DS had a cool 3D system. That gimmick, if you will, was pretty neat, having those things look like they're popped off the screen. I always enjoyed it. So for me, Resident Evil 3D Mercenaries was fine. There's not much to say. It's a spin-off. It's literally just Mercenaries over and over and over again. You unlock characters and just go trying to get high scores. It's fine. Resident Evil Revelations. Revelations is gonna go here in B. I would rather play it more than Outbreak. Resident Evil Revelations is another 3DS game that came out, and this was kind of when they were like, okay, let's try to inject a little bit more survival horror into our Resident Evil games, right? With the Mercenaries, everyone's like, this is just an action game spin-off. Where's the survival horror? With 5, a lot of people started feeling like they were pulling away from that survival horror, you know, like roots of what made Resident Evil. And a lot of people would even argue Resident Evil 4 is the start of that, because Resident Evil 4 really is just an action game that just makes you feel underpowered most of the time, and you have to really use your noggin to figure out how to get out of these situations. But in reality, Resident Evil 4 is just as much action as 5. There's not as many, set pieces of explosions, and, you don't have a giant minigun on the back of a truck trying to take down an El Gigante in Resident Evil 5 like you did in 4 like you did in 5, sure. But at the end of the day, it's still just a third-person action shooter. There's just more restrictions that make you feel more tense while you play it. So Resident Evil Revelations is trying to go back on that. Now, the reason I don't put it higher is because, honestly, I didn't like the story of this one, right? This starts to introduce the other companies that are trying to get involved. I can't remember the company's name. It was like Tricell, maybe. Was that the one in this one? I know they're involved at some point. And you're basically, as Jill and her partner and her team trying to investigate what's going on. There's some, undercover espionage, and then there's a mole. Some of the character designs in this looked absolutely stupid. It was okay. My biggest issue, other than, the story, is the enemies. The little abyss creatures, they kind of got boring after a while. It's actually one of the other reasons number 7 isn't one of my favorite Resident Evils, as much as I do like the game. You get kind of bored fighting the exact same thing over and over and over again. And those abyss creatures, they just kind of, over time, just kind of sucked. So for me, it's a good game. It is part of the Resident Evil library that I do enjoy, right? Anything really C tier and up, I'll say I like. If you're looking at D and down, I don't really like them, and I don't like playing them. But B is I like it, I'll play it. A is I really like it, and I'm happy to play. And S obviously is my favorites, but it sits comfortably there. Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. A lot of people are going to put this in trash, but I'm going to be honest, I would put it in D, probably above Dead A. And the reason I say, actually, let me move Gaiden down here. I actually would play Gaiden more than I'd play Umbrella Chronicles. Resident Evil Raccoon City, or Operation Raccoon City, is fine for what it's trying to do, but the problem is it's not something anybody wanted. Nobody wants an action game based in Resident Evil that's overtly action, right? This is supposed to be a third-person action combat game where you're just running around at Raccoon City as these operatives in Umbrella doing all these stupid, crazy things. And everyone's just like, wait a minute, I thought the series was supposed to be scary. Unfortunately, they really lost their way with that one, in my opinion, and it leads us to the unfortunate Resident Evil 6. A lot of people are going to put this in trash, and I don't think it's trash, but I'll tell you right now, it's in D tier. This is actually one of the few Resident Evil games, if I'm looking at the list, this is one of the few Resident Evil games I never finished. I did not like Resident Evil 6. I did not enjoy what it was doing at all. I really disliked Chris's campaign. It felt way too Call of Duty. I really didn't like Jake's campaign. It was literally just running away from that stupid creature the entire time, which again, I get as the concept and the purpose of it, but it was like, okay, you know, after the 7th time he's chasing you, it gets a little old. Leon's campaign is fine. Obviously, it is the highlight of the game, and when I do replay it, I usually play through Leon's. I'll get a little bit into Chris's, and then I usually just quit. And I honestly don't even think I've ever played Ada's campaign because I never beat the game and unlocked it. So for me, Resident Evil 6 is just a game that I just don't like. I don't like how, you know, maneuverable your character is in some, you have Leon literally shooting off his gun and then leaping back and on his back, shooting his gun, then rolling over and shooting. It's like, dude, is this John Wick or is this Resident Evil? Like, calm the hell down. So for me, it just took me out of the Resident Evil formula so much. And it did for a lot of people. A lot of people will mark this as the lowest point in the franchise's history. Now, the good news is, and I'm gonna be honest, right? This is I'm trying to, now let's take off the bias hat. At the end of the day, it's a fine game. It's not trash, right? If you're a real Resident Evil fan and you like all the games and you're being fair, this is probably a C, not a D. For me, it's a D because I just really don't like it. But I also recognize it's not a trash game, right? It's not garbage. It's not a heap of junk that they coded incorrectly that is unplayable or just so bad. It's a good game. It can be played beginning to end. It can be enjoyed. I just don't like it. Resident Evil Revelations 2. Here is one of my biggest disappointments in this entire franchise. I thought I would absolutely love this game, especially coming off the heels of Resident Evil 6. I thought Resident Evil Revelations would be the next big game that would like send me over the moon in enjoyment, and I would just fall in love with it, right? You get Barry's daughter, you get Claire back, you get Barry back. And then you get to the end and you realize who the main villain is. It's the sister of you know who. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Okay, sure, let's pull some shit out of our ass and try to make this make sense. But overall, when you play it all from beginning to end, I find this kind of ranks more of a C for me. It's not my favorite. It's not the worst. I would rather play it than Chronicles. I'd rather, you know what? I'd probably stick it here. I would rather play it than these. But I still would probably rather play 0 more than Revelations 2. It's fine. I don't really know what else to say. I finished it. I liked it. I did play through it during that's the period of time where they're releasing it by episodes. So I didn't get to play it all at once. I had to play it in the episode of release dates. It was okay. If you said, hey, play Resident Evil Revelations, I'm probably going to play the first one more. Umbrella Corps, trash. This game is trash. They were trying to capitalize on the arena shooter like craze that was going on, and there were some things that seemed cool about it, right? To me, I do like the idea of a PvP shooter set in the Resident Evil universe where you have to also worry about zombies, right? There was like, you know, characters that could make zombies go in a certain direction or chase after a certain player, and it seemed fine, but they were trying to push this like esport mentality about it. And you know what I don't really like? Esports. And then when the game comes out, it's just so underwhelming that, yeah, for me, that's trash. Again, not a game I ever really completed. I don't know that you can complete it, but it is what it is. Resident Evil 7, a lot of people's favorite game of the modern Resident Evil era. And for me, Resident Evil 7 is exactly that. It is one of my favorite games of the modern era, but it's not my favorite. So much so, in fact, I'm actually going to stick it in A, but I am going to stick it here. Stop it. I'm gonna stick it right there. I would rather play Resident Evil 7 than the original 4 and the original. It just brings back that terror that we all really liked in Resident Evil, right? You have the Baker family and they're very unnerving, right? Very Texas Chainsaw Massacre, cannibalistic kind of vibe. You know, you have all the encounters with Mr. Baker throughout the house where he's in the car and he shoots himself while you're climbing the ladder. Like all those moments, they stick in your head, right? They did a great job of making moments that you remember. You have the whole opening sequence with Mia. When I first played this, I played it in the dark because I heard this game was actually scary again. I played it in the dark. I had it on my big screen over here in front of me. And when Mia comes crawling up those stairs and grabs you, oh, the chills that I got. But I loved it. I enjoyed every second of it. You have the cool little sequence with Margaret in the house outside, out back, where you have to fight her, and she turns into like that buggy, gross, maggoty thing. And then you have the son, where you have the more psychological horror. They did a great job of mixing all the different types of horror, right? You have Jack, who's more that aggressive chasing, kind of like a Nemesis type thing, where he's always coming after you. Then you have Margaret, who's more of the gross out horror. Then you have the son, whose name I'm sorry I can't remember right now, who is more the psychological horror, right? They kind of try to hit every aspect of horror equally throughout this game in different ways. And then you get to the end with the cruise ship, which I didn't mind. That was actually fine for me. I know a lot of people say that's the downside of the game, is that last, quarter of the game where you're basically running and gunning. It's not that part that I don't like. What I don't like are the molded. The molded are so boring as enemies, especially when you've seen them 50 times over and over, and they're the only enemy you really have. Like, yes, you have Margaret, and yes, you have Jack, and that's it though. Those are the only real two enemies that you face that are not the molded. So for me, by the time I was done with the game, I'm like, oh my God, if I see another molded, I'm just gonna cry, because I don't like them anymore. They got overused, right? That game really could have benefited from some creatures or something unique to be like, oh, here's what happens when alligators get crossed with the T-virus in the bayou, something crazy like that. They're like hunter hybrids. That would have been cool. But no, we just get molded, right? There's so many creatures in the Louisiana bayou that they could have like changed and altered with the virus or whatever they were trying to say was happening. I know it's the molded with the girl and all that, but like there's so many things they could have done that could have added to this game in terms of enemy variety, and that's what holds it back from being an S tier for me. Is I just get bored by the end because I'm tired of seeing molded, but I still love the game a lot. Resident Evil 2 remake. So if you were to ask me what my favorite game of all time is, this is it. The Resident Evil 2 remake is my favorite video game. I love this game so much. I have played it so much. I think I have over 100 hours in it if I check Steam. I think Steam only says like 80 something, but I know I played more than that because I played the demo and I played other stuff. I love that game. It is one of my favorite games. It's one of the few games I really am pushing to 100%. I don't do it quickly, and I'm not doing it all at once, and I do it over the course of time because I like to just stretch out my enjoyment and time I get with the game. But this is my ideal Resident Evil, right? We go back to the third person, more action combat type of game, which is fine because they mix the atmosphere of the Raccoon Police Department, Raccoon City, Mr. X, the zombies. They mix all that in so well that although you are a third-person action combat, you're still, low on ammo. You're still really weak if you get bit. Your health pool ain't that big. The enemies can kill you. Even the most basic zombie will destroy you if you're not careful. I love it. The characters are awesome in it. I love Claire. I love Leon. The way they did Sherry's story, the way they did Ironside's story. Kendo gets a huge improvement from being the creep, that he is in the original. There's just so much that they do in this remake that it just, whenever I want to play a game that just is kind of like my comfort zone, right? I don't want to say cozy because it's far from that, but if I want to play what I would call a cozy game so I can calm down or just have a good day at the end of a long work day, guess what I'm playing? It's Resident Evil 2. It's always installed on my computer. It's always ready to go. The only thing that would have made that game better for me is nothing. That's literally how I feel about it. The game is perfect, and I will play it probably until they either remake it again, or maybe they remake number 1, which I know there's a lot of rumors that that's what's coming next. If they remake 1 in the same style of 2 and they stay faithful to it, unlike another remake we're going to talk about here shortly, it could maybe surpass how much I like the Resident Evil 2 remake. But for now, nothing has come close to it. Not even the Resident Evil 4 remake, nothing. This game has just surpassed all the expectations I had when it was first announced, right? The original number 2 is one of the best Resident Evil games ever made, arguably one of the best survival horror games ever made, and then you just took that and you put the best coat of paint, you updated everything about it, you made it literally what every Resident Evil player wanted, except for, and I will give credit where it's due, some of us, me included sometimes, who wish you would have kept the tank controls, the fixed cameras, but we have to understand that that's just an old, you know, an old gameplay style, gameplay mechanic from a bygone era that just isn't popular. And I'm kind of glad they took it out. And the reason I'm glad is because I want this series to hit as much of an audience as it can. And I want people to enjoy this series as it's intended to be, a survival horror. And if you take out the third person aspect, the combat aspect, and you put in only tank controls, fixed cameras, limited inventory, well, guess what? There's so many people who won't even give it a shot because they're gonna think, well, that's pretty archaic. I'm not gonna enjoy that. I'm not even gonna try it. So there is part of me that understands why these changes are made, and I'm glad that they made them. Resident Evil Resistance, trash. Resident Evil 3, Reverse, trash. Let's just do that, right? I love Capcom and their never-ending need to try to make the next big multiplayer thing happen. I just wish they would stop. Just give us Outbreak. Stop making these spin-offs and just give us Outbreak. Anyways, Resident Evil 3. The Resident Evil 3 remake is fine, but I do feel a lot of the issues that a lot of people have is that they removed so much from the game in terms of, like, they removed the clock tower, they removed sequences. But really what they removed isn't even all that. It's this terror of Nemesis. Because Nemesis in the original would just show up when you least expected it, and he would just chase you around a courtyard for 5 minutes and then just disappear. And you're like, well, what the hell was that for? What scripted event caused that? None, it just happens. It was scary, it was terrifying. In the remake, he's so scripted and you always know where he is. And because you don't really function in a big open city, you function in hubs, right? When you get to that section with the courtyard with the stairs that go up into, you know, the safe zone, you know, where the Mega Man statue, all that stuff is, where the big ball rolls down. He's just there. He's in that hub. You could go a different way and you don't have to worry about him, but if you need to go through that hub, he's there. Well, why? Why is he there? It's because he's scripted to be there, and he's not gonna just randomly show up somewhere else until you complete that section of the game that requires you to go through that hub area. And that's what really kills Nemesis, because he's not, I mean, he's still scary, he's still strong, he's still gonna F you up, but he doesn't just show up when you don't expect it. In this game, you know exactly every single spot he's gonna show up. You know every single time he's gonna come through a wall, every single time he's gonna chase you. You know every hub area where he is, because it's so scripted. They really should have done, and everybody agrees, they should have just put the Mr. X AI model into Nemesis and have him roaming the entire streets while you're trying to run through the game. He would have been so scary and so terrifying at that point, because he really literally could show up at any time. But for some reason, they didn't do that. They just gave him his own scripted events to make him more of like an ongoing boss, which I guess is its own thing, right? It's still kind of cool. He is a boss that you constantly have to deal with. You can't kill him. No matter how many times you try, he shows up again. And then you have the whole thing where he turns into like this weird, creepy dog thing. And yes, I do believe he does that in the original, right? He does turn into like a creepy creature, dog-like creature, and then he turns into a giant blob that you have to destroy. So it still follows some of those, but in the remake, it just didn't feel the same because everything was so scripted with him. It was like, yeah, of course, that's the next thing that's gonna happen. He's gonna do this, then you're gonna do that, then he's gonna do this. So for me, it's fun, but I would rather play the original. Whenever it comes to Resident Evil 3, I will always play the original over the remake. I probably would play it more than these two and probably play it less than Code Veronica. It's fine. It's just, it had so much more potential than what it gave us, only because they shortened it too much. And I know a lot of people complain, well, the game can be beat in under like 2 hours. Have you played any Resident Evil games? Almost every Resident Evil game can be beat in under 2 hours. That's literally how you get like S ranks and unlock the unlimited rocket launchers and unlimited ammo guns, is by speed running these games. They've always been meant to be that way. Yes, you can slow roll it and play it, you know, spot by spot, case by case, you know, go from door to door, key to key, you know, area to area, and it'll take you a good maybe 6 to 8 hours on average, especially for some of the earlier games. But if you know the location of every item, what rooms are irrelevant, what spots you don't need to go to, you can beat almost every Resident Evil in under 2 to 3 hours. So that argument of why people are like, well, you can speedrun Resident Evil 3 Remake in like 2 hours. Well, yeah, you can do that with literally almost every single game here, save for some of the ones that are more restrictive, like maybe the original 4 and 5 Code Veronica. But all these original ones, hell, even the Resident Evil 2 Remake, you can get through those really fast. Next, let's take a look at Village, Resident Evil 8. This game's fine. I really liked it. I do enjoy it. I'm not the biggest fan of the first-person Resident Evil, though. That's kind of the one thing that holds this game back for me. I don't like first person when it comes to my survival horror. Now, they did announce for Requiem, you can freely choose between first and third person, which is great because I'm going to play in third person. I do understand why they chose first person, right? They're like, here, the action is more in your face. When things happen, it's more in your face, especially the stupid baby. Oh my God. If there was I released a video, the scariest moments in gaming. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are seeing that video, but I did put that moment in there because I really do truly feel that baby is one of the scariest things in gaming. It's so unnerving. For me, it's probably going to go in A tier though, because I do really like the game and I do have a lot of fun with it. I would rather play it. I would rather probably play this over the original 4. I probably would do it that way. No, I'd actually would do that because I'd rather play it more than 7. It's just so much fun. Right? You have the whole sequence with Lady D, and you know, one of the biggest lies the game ever told us was that Lady D was going to be a primary villain, and then she's really only the first act. And then you have, you know, the Duke. There's so many mysteries around the Duke and where he's coming from, why he's so big, stuff like that. Then you have Heisenberg and his whole sequence, which a lot of people don't like because it does amp up the action, but I kind of liked that. I kind of like that there's, again, a change to how the gameplay plays throughout the entire sequence. So it's not so samey, right? You have Lady D, which is more of a chase horror. You're running around trying to get away from her daughters. And then you have the little mini bosses with the daughters, and then you have the whole sequence with Angela, and it's more, again, psychological. You're trying to put the puzzle together in the underground when the stupid baby shows up. And then you have Heisenberg, which is more fitting into the action part of the first-person shooter. So I kind of like that there's just little bits of all these different types of gameplay in these Resident Evil games, right? That's what Resident Evil 7 did with its, you know, layout of the sequence of things that were going on. And I think that they do that really well, and it's phenomenal. So for me, Resident Evil Village, great game. I absolutely love it. I will play it over and over again. I will tell you, yes, I do acknowledge they did release the patch where you can go to third person. That's how I play the game now. I just think it is stupid that they do everything in their power to prevent you from seeing his face. The dumbest thing ever. I don't know why they're doing that, but whatever. Last but not least, we have Resident Evil 4, the remake, and for me, this is an S tier. I know there's a lot of people who don't like this game as much as the original, right? They remove a lot of the camp, they remove a lot of the cheese, and I do miss it, right? Salazar, one of the best villains in Resident Evil, in the original Resident Evil 4, is kind of just a mediocre, mid, kind of run-of-the-mill villain in the remake. I totally understand, right? We all miss Mr. Kennedy, right? We miss that voice, that silliness that he brought.
I was starting to wonder when you might notice us.
Who are you?
Me llamo Ramon Salazar, the 8th Castellan of this magnificent architecture. I have been honored with the prodigious power from the great Lord Sadler. I've been expecting you, my brethrens.
No thanks, bro.
And they just make him a normal dude in the remake. He's just ugly, you know, as it can be. So for me, I get that. I'm on the same boat as you there. I miss my original Salazar, but mechanically, visually, I prefer it to the original by a long margin. I really like the remake a lot. It kind of, you know, it takes what that original was doing and it really just gives it a new coat of paint and makes it look so much nicer. The ability to move and shoot is there, right? An upgraded mechanic. And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but now it feels more to action. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just the natural progression of video games, right? In the original Resident Evil, you didn't have quick turn. By Resident Evil 3, you could quick turn. And a lot of people at that time were like, well, now this is too arcadey. Well, Resident Evil 3 had the dodge and you could barely control it, but when it happened, it felt awesome. And now you have Resident Evil 6, which is like, well, we went from quick turning to dodging to now I can just throw myself on the ground and roll around. Well, they realize, okay, that's a little bit much. Let's remove that. And instead, let's just move while we shoot. So there are compromises that have to be made to kind of keep you constrained to prevent you from doing these ridiculous acrobatics. And I personally think that Resident Evil 4, the remake, Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake, I think they hit that balance very well. You can move and shoot, you can kind of run around, you can really get yourself positioned where you want to, but because they're still contained in these small little zones and areas where you have to fight, you know, numerous enemies, you're still kind of screwed if you corner yourself or if you don't put yourself in a good position, and you can't just throw yourself on the ground or roll to safety kind of like you could in 6. So for me, Resident Evil 4, the remake, is S tier. It is awesome. I would probably put it right here. I would definitely play it more than the original, but I would play the original Resident Evil 2 before these. This is literally the order that I would probably play these games. Let's actually fix that. But what does your tier list look like? How does your tier list compare to mine? Are you one of the people who's going to have this as number 1? And I totally understand why. Again, it is the most popular opinion that this is the best Resident Evil game, and I don't deny that at all. But remember, this is my personal opinion when it comes to what I enjoy when I go to a Resident Evil game. As someone who has the merch, who has the autographs, who has the entire book series, this is where I fit most when it comes to what I'm looking for in these games. And when they come out with the next remake, I personally hope they remake this one first, the original. The only reason is because if you go to 5, right, which a lot of people were saying, well, you're going to go from 2 to 3 to 4 and now to 5. 5 doesn't have any build-up at this point. You don't know who Chris is, right? If you're just coming into this new generation of Resident Evil, you only have Claire and Leon as your primary characters, and now Jill. Resident Evil 5 has Jill, but only if you know the secret of one of the characters, and the main character is Chris. You don't even know who Chris is. So what I really hope they do is they do Resident Evil the original or Code Veronica. Because if they do Code Veronica, that actually fits perfectly, right? If you played 2, you went from 2 to 3 to 4. So now you know Leon's story. Well, what happened to Claire? Right? That's going to be the natural next step for someone who hasn't played all the other games. They're going to say, well, if they started here at Resident Evil 2 Remake, where the hell's Claire? Code Veronica is going to do that. And then Code Veronica could introduce Chris and Wesker. But the problem is, and this is where my issue with that would be, is Wesker is coming back after having died to the Tyrant in the first game. So you're gonna kill that spoiler, that moment for everybody if you don't remake the first one. Same thing with 5, right? 5's main antagonist is Wesker, and the whole time you can tell there's a history between him and Chris. Well, where does that history start? It all starts in the original. So for me personally, I hope the next remake is Resident Evil 1. That way they can tell that story, get Chris into the story with Wesker, and then they can slowly remake all the other ones, and now you can put those puzzle pieces together because you now have the foundation of who all these characters are, right? You go for Resident Evil 1, you could technically then do 0, because now you have Rebecca in Resident Evil 1, you have Alpha Team, you're told about Bravo Team, but you don't know what happened, and then you release the remake of Resident Evil 0, you know, make it more aligned to the modern games, and boom, now you have that story. Then you go to Code Veronica, which tells what happens to Chris and Wesker, boom, and then you release 5 as this like culmination of all these stories together, and then I think that would be the perfect release schedule for these games. Obviously, they're not all going to sell the same. Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil 2 Remake are going to sell way better than probably the original remake, especially more than 0, but my hope is, and I know this is wishful thinking, my hope is that the profit isn't as important as the passion of remaking these games for us who, in our generation, who grew up with the originals, want to see these games continue to strive, hit new generations, hit new people with these new, like, fresh coats of paint in the RE engine, which looks fantastic. I would love to play the original Resident Evil in the RE engine. I think that would be so awesome to see Tyrant, to see the Hunters, to see the mansion. Just seeing the mansion in the RE engine would be so cool, how claustrophobic that would feel. But anyways, I digress. I'll stop there. This is my tier list. Let me know what your tier list is. And as I said before, this is just something different to bring you some new type of content for the holidays. Happy 4th of July to everybody who's celebrating. Enjoy some fireworks. Do so responsibly. And until next time, have a great day.